No articles written at that time. There was an article written in January by a guy in Shreveport, just down the road from me. But the next search terms were vitamin D in the brain. And I stumble into a guy who's been writing about vitamin D, where the vitamin D receptors are. So if the vitamin D does something, it has to have a D receptor. And he has written about these nuclei, the nucleus pontus reticularis oralis caudalis, this long stripe of cells in the brainstem that no one knows about, okay? I'm a neurologist, I don't know about it. This guy has actually shown that there are vitamin D receptors in the sleep switches that make us paralyzed. He's shown that there are vitamin D receptors in the switches that run the clock. So the clock is about what time do we fall asleep? How do we coordinate these changes in the ratios of the neurotransmitters over an 8-hour span, really over a 24-hour span. So when people say, gee, your circadian rhythm isn't okay, what they're talking about is really light comes through the eye and coordinates our brain linked into a 24-hour cycle. That is very well publicized, okay? And that actually is linked to a vitamin 2 because it goes light, eye, retinoids, vitamin A, pineal gland, and then those messages have to be coordinated to a switching system that says it's 10 o'clock, time for you to go to bed. And then it puts out these chemical mixes that say drowsy. It's a warning phase. So we perceive it as, oh, it's time for me to go to bed. But it really happens all of a sudden, like you're not sleepy and then you are, and then you're not asleep. You're just sleepy because all of a sudden, Amy, you're about to be paralyzed. You better be in your little nest before that happens. So it's thinking about sleep as being one, heavily coordinated to the clock. And it turns out vitamin D is heavily imbued in the clock. Why? The guy that I stumble on is a guy named Walter Stumpf. And he's already written 30 years, starting in the early 80s, that this is a second hormone. A is actually a vitamin, but it's also a hormone. We do get it in orally. D is a hormone that we make on our own skin when we're in the sun, and it coordinates us to the winter-summer cycle. That means if you've ever heard about the concept of hibernation, there has to be a way that we link what our body does in the winter to the fact that it's winter. How do we do that? Well, Walter clarifies the whole thing and says, well, it turns out this particular wavelength that makes this hormone on our skin goes away in the winter sunlight. UVA is still there, but UVB is not. So it's a hormone, and he has already put together an explanation for, oh, what are the things that you would like to link to the seasons? Fertility. If you don't have any food because it's 4 feet of snow and there's no way for you to get any food, you don't want to have your babies then. Oh, would you like to sleep longer and lower your metabolic rate so you can survive the lack of food? The dermatologists in the 80s are just starting to say, you know, sunburn is bad for you.
Yeah.
Now they've become so radicalized that being in the sun is bad for you. That's insane. It turns out they are not able to focus on the fact that their protecting of their organ, the skin, has led to these horrible outcomes because we were meant to live out in the sun. Every animal lives out in the sun, okay? Being outdoors is not just about D. It is about multiple other wavelengths of energy that were there since the beginning, okay? This world is not about humans. It's about hundreds of millions of other animals, and they've all had these biologic processes, and we're the dummies who went indoors.